The narrow street carried a gentle stillness in the earliest hours of dawn, a quiet breath that lingered beneath the cool sky. Soft shadows rested beside the walls, and the stones underfoot held the faint memory of yesterday's footsteps. Thin rays of morning light slipped between tightly spaced rooftops, touching the ground in delicate patterns. Even at this peaceful time, the street never felt completely asleep. Somewhere behind the windows, someone shifted, someone whispered, someone prepared for a new day with slow, familiar movements. A distant clatter of pots reached the air with a steady rhythm, followed by the creak of a wooden door pushed open by a half-awake hand. The sound was gentle, never sharp or startling. It blended with the soft brushing of a broom across stone as someone swept their doorstep with patient strokes. These small noises formed the calm heartbeat of the street's morning, a rhythm that returned day after day without feeling repetitive or rushed. Nothing stirred suddenly, everything moved with quiet intention. The houses lining the street stood close enough for neighbors to greet each other from window to window without raising their voices. Their walls leaned inward slightly, shaped by years of sun, wind, and the closeness of shared life. The street held their weight comfortably, as if it had grown accustomed to supporting them through countless seasons. In the early light, the exteriors of the homes appeared soft and muted, their colors warmed by time and use. Even in stillness, they felt lived in, familiar, dependable. Families began to step out one by one, their movements slow and unhurried. Mothers carried baskets filled with vegetables or bread, the woven handles resting easily against their palms. Fathers walked with mild expressions, adjusting their shawls or sleeves as the morning air settled around them. Each person followed a path marked not by maps or signs, but by memory and daily habit. The narrowness of the street influenced their steps, guiding them gently along its winding way. Vendors started arranging their small carts near the walls. The wheels made a low creaking sound, sliding into the places they had occupied for years. Fresh fruit filled shallow wooden crates, the colors soft in the dim morning light. A faint sweetness drifted from the ripe ones, creating a subtle fragrance that lingered near the vendor's stall. A baker opened his box of warm pastries, letting the steam escape in slow curls. The blend of scents, fresh dough, warm spices, and cool stone created an atmosphere that felt comforting without demanding attention. Children wandered into the street shortly after their parents, still blinking sleep from their eyes. They moved quietly at first, trailing fingers along the walls or nudging pebbles with the tips of their shoes. Their whispers floated softly between the buildings, forming little pockets of sound that dissolved into the morning air. They shared shy smiles and gentle greetings, their early play beginning in the hush before the day grew lively. Even their small footsteps matched the peaceful tone of the morning. People carrying water from the communal well walked with a practiced ease, the steady slosh of water inside their buckets adding to the calm arrangement of sounds around them. Someone fed a pair of birds perched on a low ledge, dropping a few crumbs and watching them flutter their wings softly. A woman paused to tighten the cloth around her hair, her movements unhurried. Life in the narrow street unfolded without urgency, each action arriving gently, as though the street itself encouraged a slower pace. The stones beneath everyone's feet were smooth from years of movement. Some carried tiny cracks, softened by dust and time. Others held faint grooves left by carts that had passed for generations. Although the street twisted and narrowed in places, the people who lived there walked confidently, guided by familiarity. They knew which corner dipped slightly, which step had a shallow curve, which doorway opened outward more than the others. These small details were woven into their daily routines. As the sunlight grew stronger, it reached deeper between the houses, brushing the lower walls with a warm glow. Shadows shifted with quiet grace, stretching across the ground like still water being stirred. Birds perched on roof edges chirped softly, adding gentle notes to the morning. The air warmed slightly, carrying with it the soft mixed scent of breakfast from various homes, rice simmering, bread warming, vegetables sizzling lightly. The aromas blended like threads in a calm tapestry. A horse cart made its way through the center of the street, its hooves tapping lightly on the stone. The driver sat upright, guiding the horse with small, steady motions. Residents moved aside without strain, offering polite nods. The passing cart felt like a familiar part of the morning, neither noisy nor intrusive. It simply travelled its path with measured rhythm, sharing the street with everyone else. Nabe. Oars greeted one another kindly as they crossed paths. A friendly nod here, a gentle smile there, a short exchange of words about the weather or the morning's coolness. Nothing rushed, nothing forced, just everyday warmth expressed in small, effortless ways. A man paused to help an elderly neighbor adjust a heavy basket. A woman handed a small fruit to a child walking by. These gestures felt natural, as if they belonged to the very structure of the street. Children gradually became more energetic as the morning settled in, though their play still carried a soft tone. They gathered near doorways or in small open patches, tossing pebbles or tracing shapes in the dusty ground. Their laughter rose lightly into the air, not loud or sharp but smooth, blending comfortably with the other gentle sounds surrounding them. Their presence added brightness, without disrupting the calmness of the street. The narrow street held everything in balance, movement without haste, sound without noise, closeness without pressure. The buildings, the people, the carts, the vendors, the children, the animals, all shared the same compact space respectfully. Life existed here not in grand events but in steady routines, quiet exchanges, and calm familiarity. The street remained fully awake, yet nothing about it felt restless. Its liveliness was soft, like the glow of a lamp at night, steady and warm. The homes stood close enough that their walls seemed to lean gently toward each other, as if sharing old secrets through the bricks. Each building settled into its place with a quiet sense of belonging, their edges touching like familiar hands resting side by side. The narrow gaps between them felt less like separations and more like soft breaths of space, small enough for whispers to carry but wide enough for light to slip through in thin, warm streams. The closeness created a comforting stillness, a feeling that every home supported the next with steady patience. In the early morning, the surfaces of the houses glowed faintly as sunlight moved across them. The gentle beams touched faded paint, worn shutters, and uneven stones, giving everything a soft, warm appearance. The textures of the walls told stories of seasons long past. Some carried tiny cracks that looked like delicate lines drawn by time itself. Others held patches where families had painted over old marks, leaving behind light traces of color from earlier days. Even the tiles on the rooftops carried the peaceful weight of memory, resting neatly in rows like quiet thoughts lined up in order. Windows opened outward, revealing small details of the lives inside. Curtains swayed lightly from the movement of morning air drifting into the rooms. A few plants rested on window ledges, their leaves reaching toward the sun with gentle enthusiasm. Some windows framed the silhouettes of people beginning their day, tying cloths, warming their hands, stretching slowly as they looked outside. Everything felt calm, unhurried, wrapped in a peaceful rhythm of daily routine. Inside each home, families prepared their mornings with soft conversations and simple gestures. A mother folded a blanket with practiced ease, smoothing its corners before placing it neatly on a shelf. A father poured warm tea into clay cups, the rising steam curling gracefully upward. A child rubbed sleep from their eyes while sitting on the edge of a wooden feet dangling above the cool floor. The closeness of the houses made even these small sounds travel softly between the walls. The clink of a cup, the rustle of fabric, the quiet murmur of a gentle voice, all blended into a gentle harmony. Some homes had small balconies that extended just far enough for someone to step outside. These tiny spaces became peaceful corners where people paused to breathe in the morning air. A woman brushed crumbs from the railing while watching the street below. An elder sat in a low chair, enjoying the warmth of sunlight against their skin. A young man leaned forward with folded arms, letting the light wash over his thoughts. These balconies felt like tiny islands floating above the narrow street, inviting moments of reflection before the day unfolded fully. Staircases curled upward inside the homes, made from wood that felt smooth from long use. Each step carried the soft patter of feet, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, always familiar. The sound echoed gently against the walls, creating a comforting rhythm. The rooms held simple furniture carved with care, pieces passed down from older generations. The edges were worn in places, softened by the many hands that had touched them. These objects carried the quiet love of families who had lived there long before, the kitchens filled with warm aromas as breakfasts cooked slowly over small stoves. The scent drifted upward, weaving through tiny cracks and along the narrow spaces between houses. A rich blend of spices and warmth wrapped around the walls, giving the entire street a soft, home-like feeling. Mothers prepared meals with steady movements, mixing ingredients in bowls that had been used for years. Children peeked over table edges, curious about the day's food. The gentle sizzle of pans created a soothing background note, steady and familiar. The walls between homes, though close, never felt confining. Instead, they seemed to offer comfort, as though each house leaned a little for support. The closeness created a sense of shared shelter. When wind blew strongly, the houses stood firm together, the narrow gaps allowing just enough air to hum softly without harshness. During rain, water trickled from one roof tile to another, creating a pleasant tapping sound along the edges. The steady drip echoed in the spaces between homes, like a quiet lullaby created by the weather. Throughout the day, the houses shaded one another kindly. Where one stood taller, it offered cool shelter to the one beside it. Where another opened towards sunlight, it reflected the warm glow back toward its neighbor. Every building had a place and purpose in the silent arrangement. They formed gentle lines and small angles, creating shapes that felt natural and comforting to the people living within them. No home looked the same, yet together they formed a harmonious patchwork, Inside, families sat together on woven mats spread across the floors. They spoke in calm tones about small matters, the weather, the day's work, the simple joys of daily life. Children played quiet games, arranging wooden blocks or drawing soft patterns in the dust with their fingertips. The gentle sound of their laughter remained contained in the cozy rooms, touching the walls with warmth. Elders shared stories in calm voices, describing moments from the past with slow, steady words that carried wisdom. As the day progressed, the homes maintained their steady presence. The sunlight shifted gradually across their surfaces, creating changing patterns that moved like peaceful shadows. Birds perched along the rooftops, hopping lightly from one house to another. A cat stretched lazily near a doorstep before curling into a soft corner beneath a shaded ledge. The calm movements of these small creatures brought a quiet charm to the close-knit row of buildings. The houses held the coolness of shadow in some rooms and the gentle warmth of sunlight in others. Even in the tightest corners, there was a feeling of softness. Every space, no matter how small, felt lived in and cared for. The walls carried the marks of hands that had touched them, the weight of lives that had passed through them, the quiet history of families who had called them home. Their closeness formed a peaceful shelter, a steady embrace holding generations gently in place. The day continued quietly, with the homes standing side by side, leaning slightly toward one another in silent companionship. Their presence remained steady, carrying the soft weight of comfort and familiarity, held together by years of shared life and the warm simplicity of being close. The pathways of the neighborhood formed twists and bends that felt like the gentle turns of an old tapestry, woven with care over many years. Each alley curved in its own quiet direction, never sharply, always with a softness that matched the calm spirit of the place. The way the streets wound around the homes created the sense of a gentle maze, one born not from confusion but from layers of life stacked carefully over time. Walking through it felt like drifting through a peaceful dream where every turn offered a new moment of stillness. The narrow passages carried faint echoes of footsteps from the past. Stones smoothed by generations lay beneath the feet of anyone who wandered through, their textures warm in sunlight and cool in shadow. Some paths were lined with potted plants whose leaves reached out like welcoming hands. Others opened into tiny pockets of space where a bit of sky peeked through between the rooftops. These quiet openings gave the feeling of brief pauses in a story, little resting spots where the world seemed to breathe slowly. People moved through the maze with a natural ease. Their steps followed routes they knew so well that they rarely needed to think about where they were going. A young boy carried a small basket toward the market, his pace steady and relaxed, as if the maze guided him gently. A woman walked with her shawl folded neatly across her shoulders, taking the path that curved around a pair of leaning houses. The familiarity of the turns made the journey feel soothing rather than tiring. There was no rush, no urgency, only the soft rhythm of routine. Some alleys were so narrow that two people passing each other needed to turn slightly to make room. When they did, they exchanged small smiles or nods, gestures filled with quiet friendliness. The closeness never felt uncomfortable. Instead, it created a sense of shared understanding, as though everyone recognized that the maze belonged to all of them and that each path was a shared thread in the delicate fabric of daily life. Even the tightest spaces carried a gentle feeling of companionship. Certain corners held tiny surprises that felt like hidden treasures. One turn revealed a wall covered in ivy, its green leaves shifting softly whenever the breeze moved through. Another opened to a small stone bench tucked between two homes, placed there long ago by someone who wished for a peaceful place to sit. The bench carried marks from years of use, smoothed by countless resting bodies. Sometimes an elder could be found there, sitting quietly, observing the world with calm eyes that had seen many seasons pass through the maze. Children wandered the winding pathways with an unspoken trust in their surroundings. They walked with soft steps, looking curiously at the little details along the way. A carved wooden door, a crack in the wall shaped like a tiny river, or a piece of chalk left behind from a game. They treated the maze like a gentle adventure, one without rush or fear. The turns inspired their imaginations, turning each pathway into a small world of its own. Their quiet excitement spread lightly through the air, adding a soft brightness to the calm streets. Vendors carried their carts through the maze with patient movements. The wheels made light creaking sounds against the stone, echoing softly in the narrow spaces. The vendors knew which corners were tight and when to slow down, guiding their carts with gentle hands. They greeted familiar faces as they passed, lifting a hand in a small wave or offering a warm, simple greeting. Their presence added a sense of activity to the maze without disturbing its tranquility. The maze shifted with the changing light throughout the day. In the morning, sunlight slipped gently through the gaps, creating thin trails of gold along the ground. At midday, the shade grew deeper in some areas, while the corners captured the warmth in bright, soothing patches. Each turn offered a slightly different atmosphere, shaped by the angle of the sun and the whisper of the breeze moving through the buildings. This quiet dance of light and shadow gave the maze a living quality, as if it responded gently to the passing hours. Doors opened softly as people stepped out to tend to small tasks. Someone hung laundry on a rope stretched between two homes, the fabric swaying gently in the breeze. Another swept dust from their doorway, the strokes slow and measured. A man carried a bowl of grain to feed a pair of pigeons waiting patiently on a ledge. These simple actions brought a quiet warmth to the maze, reminding everyone that life here was built from small, peaceful moments. The sounds drifting through the pathways were light and soothing. A distant conversation carried softly from another corner. A laugh echoed briefly before settling into silence. The rustle of leaves mixed with the faint clatter of a pot lid. Each sound blended seamlessly into the peaceful environment, never breaking the calm flow of the day. The maze felt like a resting place for gentle sounds, holding them with care before letting them drift away. Some corners offered glimpses into courtyards hidden behind wooden gates. The gates stood slightly ajar, revealing the flutter of a cloth hanging to dry or the gentle movement of a family gathered around a table. These glimpses created a feeling of connection without intruding, as if the maze allowed people to sense the presence of others without disturbing their space. It felt safe, warm, and quietly connected. As the day stretched onward, the maze continued to cradle the movement of people with steady patience. Every turn welcomed familiar footsteps. Every narrow passage held its soft silence. The winding paths carried the marks of countless lives that had passed through them, each step leaving a quiet imprint on the stones. The maze existed not to confuse but to hold life gently within its curves, offering comfort in its winding embrace and calmness in its steady presence. The alleys carried the soft rhythm of children's footsteps long before the day grew lively. The sound arrived gently, like tiny taps brushing against the stone paths in an unhurried pattern. The little feet that moved through the narrow spaces brought a warm touch of life to the still morning air. They moved with a lightness that felt almost like floating, carefree, curious, and untouched by the weight that adults often carried. Their small steps echoed softly between the close walls, turning the alleys into peaceful corridors where childhood unfolded naturally. Children stepped outside with sleepy eyes and slow smiles, their hair still tousled from dreams not long awakened. The cool breeze brushed against their cheeks as they walked barefoot or in light sandals, testing the warmth of the ground. Some hugged their arms around themselves for a moment before relaxing into the gentle comfort of the morning air. They looked toward familiar friends who appeared one by one from nearby doorways, forming little clusters of quiet excitement. Their greetings came in soft whispers and giggles, filling the alleys with a tender sense of companionship. The alleys stretched like soft threads between the homes, sometimes straight, sometimes curving gently around corners. The child. Wren knew every turn, every small dip in the ground, every tiny stone that seemed to belong only to them. They walked with an easy confidence, weaving through the paths as though they had been designed especially for their small steps. Nothing in the alleys felt too large or overwhelming. The spaces fit the children comfortably, offering room to explore without ever feeling far from home. A few of them carried simple toys made from wood, cloth, or whatever small materials they had found. One child held a little ball crafted from tightly wrapped scraps of fabric. Another clutched a wooden figure carved by an older sibling. These toys were not loud or complicated. They carried a gentle charm, well worn by countless games played under the filtered sunlight that slipped between rooftops. The children shared them freely, passing them from hand to hand with quiet joy. As the morning settled, the children began their playful rituals. Some crouched near the walls to draw lines in the dust with their fingertips, creating winding paths, simple shapes, or tiny drawings that made them smile. Others played gentle games of chase, not running too fast, always slowing their pace at tighter bends. Their laughter rose in soft waves, never harsh, never sharp, just small bursts of happiness that matched the calm tone of the alleys. A pair of siblings sat near a wooden doorstep, arranging a handful of smooth stones into neat circles and patterns. Their hands moved slowly, carefully placing each stone where it felt right. They spoke in quiet voices, deciding on shapes and taking turns adjusting the arrangement. The game had no winners or goals. It was enough simply to create something together, enjoying the peaceful moment they shared. Farther down the alley, a group of friends tossed a small cloth ball back and forth. The ball brushed gently against the wall each time it bounced, creating a soft thud that echoed lightly. They laughed when the ball rolled unexpectedly toward a corner, chasing after it with short, quick steps. Their movements remained relaxed, never disrupting the calm atmosphere. Even their excitement carried a gentle rhythm, blending with the quiet pulse of the alley around them. Now and then an adult passed by, carrying a basket or heading to work. The children stepped aside with polite smiles, allowing room for the adult to move through the narrow space. The adults returned their smiles, sometimes pausing for a brief moment to ruffle a child's hair or offer a kind word. These small interactions added warmth to the alley, weaving small threads of connection between generations. The presence of children softened the day for those who walked with heavier tasks ahead. A few children explored the shaded corners where the alley met the sides of houses. They looked curiously at plants growing in small clay pots, watching the leaves tremble slightly whenever the breeze drifted through. Some gently touched the petals of a flower, careful not to disturb it. Others looked up at the thin beams of sunlight that slipped through gaps between rooftops, fascinated by the way dust sparkled in the light. The alleys offered endless small wonders for young eyes to discover. In one quiet spot, a small group gathered around a wooden crate turned on its side. They had found it earlier and turned it into a pretend market stall. One child stood behind it, offering him imaginary fruits and grains, while the others approached with pretend coins. Their voices rose and fell in calm tones, mimicking the older vendors they watched each day. The play felt soft, steady, and filled with the gentle imitation that shaped childhood learning. The sound of distant vendors setting up their stalls occasionally drifted into the alleys, blending naturally with the children's activities. A faint clatter of pots, a soft call from a cellar, or the muffled creak of a cartwheel added layers to the calm morning. The children paused sometimes to listen, curious but not distracted. The alleys allowed the sounds to pass without disturbing the peaceful environment. Everything coexisted quietly: the play of children, the movement of adults, the morning unfolding slowly and softly. Some children wandered toward a corner where a small cat often rested. The cat lay curled near a warm patch of stone, blinking slowly as the children approached. They sat near it, careful not to crowd. One child extended a gentle hand, and the cat brushed its head softly against their fingers before settling again. The calm movements of the animal added to the sense of peace, grounding the children in a simple moment that asked for nothing more than quiet presence. The alleys continued to carry the children's gentle energy as the morning stretched forward, their footsteps mixed with the soft sounds of daily life around them, creating a warm balance that felt natural to the place. The children shaped the alleys with their laughter, their slow games, their curious observations, and the easy closeness they shared. Their presence brought a kind of brightness that did not disturb the calmness, but tea deepened it, wrapping the narrow paths in a sense of gentle, living warmth. The morning air settled gently across the neighborhood as grown-ups began stepping into the narrow streets with steady determination. Their footsteps carried a quiet energy, a soft urgency shaped not by chaos, but by the steady rhythm of daily duties. The adults moved with purpose, yet their movements never disturbed the calmness of the surroundings. Their routines flowed like a peaceful river, constant, steady, and familiar. The streets seemed to listen to their footsteps, absorbing the gentle rush of their lives with timeless patience. Shops opened their doors with a soft scrape of wood against stone. Vendors lifted cloth covers from their stands and arranged their goods in careful rows. Baskets filled with vegetables rested beside crates of spices, their colors muted by the early light. A faint fragrance drifted through the air: warm bread, cooling tea, and herbs still fresh with morning dew. The grown-ups handled their goods with practiced ease, their hands moving in calm, repetitive motions that had been learned over many seasons. Their faces carried quiet focus, softened by the comfort of routine. Workers walked through the alleys with tools slung over their shoulders or tucked into small bags. The sound of metal brushing against cloth mixed with the gentle murmur of conversations. Some greeted each other with brief nods, acknowledging the shared effort of facing another day. Their expressions showed a thoughtful balance between responsibility and acceptance, as though they carried their tasks with respect rather than complaint. The air around them felt grounded, shaped by the weight of real awe but softened by familiarity. A woman made her way toward the laundry courtyard, balancing a large basket of clothes against her hip. Her steps were sure, steady, and unhurried. She folded each piece with gentle precision, her fingers smoothing out every crease. The soft snap of fabric brushed the air, blending with the quiet hum of conversation from the nearby market stalls. Her work, though constant, moved at a pace that felt almost meditative. The rhythm of her folding created a small pocket of calm within the broader activity of the morning. A group of men carried wooden planks toward a construction site near the edge of the street. Their movements were deliberate and strong, but never rushed. They communicated with small gestures rather than loud words, understanding one another without needing to raise their voices. When they lifted the planks into place, the wood settled with a gentle thud that vibrated softly through the ground. Their work added a slow, steady heartbeat to the surroundings, a reminder of the effort required to build and maintain the homes around them. Near a bakery, a young man swept flour from the doorstep in long, smooth strokes. He paused occasionally to adjust his apron or brush hair from his forehead. The scent of warm dough drifted behind him, curling through the alley in soft waves. People walking past smiled faintly, knowing they would soon pick up loaves for their own kitchens. The baker worked quietly, letting his hands guide him through a familiar pattern. The warmth of the oven inside the shop glowed faintly against the cool morning air, creating a comforting balance. In one corner of the neighborhood, a tailor set up a small stool. Outside his shop, with careful fingers he threaded a needle and began stitching a piece of cloth. His hands moved with delicate accuracy, the thread slipping through fabric with almost silent grace. Each stitch formed a tiny moment of concentration, yet the tailor's posture remained relaxed. The act of sewing seemed to quiet the world around him, drawing him into a gentle, focused calm. People passed by and exchanged small greetings, but he continued his work without losing his peaceful rhythm. Carpenters, potters, and small craftsmen contributed their own gentle activity to the morning. A potter shaped wet clay on a spinning wheel, the slow rotation creating a soft, soothing sound. A carpenter sanded the edge of a wooden board, the fine grains falling like dusty snowfall along the ground. A woman strung beads into necklaces, her movements precise and patient. Every craft carried a hint of concentration, yet stayed wrapped in a softness that matched the calm nature of the narrow streets. In the central alley, a group of grown-ups gathered briefly near a water barrel. They filled containers one by one, the steady pour adding a soothing note to the morning soundscape. While waiting, they exchanged small pieces of conversation, simple words about the weather, a kind remark about a child's growth, or a gentle joke that invited quiet smiles. Their voices rose only slightly above whispers, never disturbing the calm around them. Their short gathering felt like an anchor in their busy day, a small pause filled with warmth before each returned to their tasks. Delivery workers pushed carts through the tight corners, guiding them with practiced care. The wheels rolled smoothly across the stone, making a soft rumbling sound that echoed lightly. They handed packages wrapped in cloth to households, their movements efficient but never hurried. The people receiving them thanked the workers with small bows or appreciative smiles. These exchanges unfolded smoothly, adding a layer of connection to the morning's gentle momentum. Some adults carried notebooks, lists, or folded sheets of instructions. They paused occasionally to review their tasks, standing beneath patches of shade cast by leaning rooftops. The sunlight shifted slowly across the alley walls as they read, highlighting dust specks floating peacefully in the air. Once they finished reviewing, they resumed walking with tender determination, letting their routines guide them through the familiar pathways. The pace of the grown-ups created a contrast to the quiet stillness of earlier hours. Their rush was not frantic, it was simply a natural part of the day, shaped by responsibility and quiet diligence. Every movement, though purposeful, carried a softness. The sounds of work, though steady, blended easily with the gentle tone of the alleys. Their lives flowed through the space like water in a shallow stream, filling the pathways with subtle energy without stirring turbulence. The grown-ups continued through their tasks as the day extended. Their steps, conversations, tools, and routines wove themselves into the calm fabric of the neighborhood. The alleys held their movement with ease, offering a steady ground for their responsibilities and the peaceful breath of comfort surrounding their efforts. Rush carried a quiet dignity, creating a serene pattern of motion that gently shaped the life of the streets. The streets grew livelier as the day stretched onward, filling with a steady stream of footsteps that blended into a soft, rhythmic hum. People from every corner of the neighborhood stepped into the alleys with a gentle sense of purpose, turning the once quiet pathways into warm, bustling corridors. The crowds did not arrive suddenly. They gathered slowly, like morning mist drifting together. Each person carried their own story, yet the closeness of the streets let their lives brush lightly against one another, creating a peaceful companionship in the middle of the movement. Vendors shifted closer to the edges of the alley, making room for passers-by. Their colorful goods lined the narrow walls, leaving only a thin pathway in between. Fruits piled in rounded heaps, stacks of cloth folded into soft blocks of color, and baskets filled with small handmade trinkets. All these added gentle vibrancy to the already lively space. The people moving through the alley admired the displays with warm glances or paused briefly to appreciate the work behind them. Even in the crowdedness, there was patience in every step. Neighbors recognized one another with small nods or thoughtful smiles as they passed. A woman carrying a sack of grain adjusted her pace to let an older man walk beside her, and they exchanged a few kind words. A pair of shopkeepers paused in their deliveries to share a short laugh about something only they seemed to understand. These quiet interactions, scattered through the crowd like tiny sparks, brought a subtle warmth to the busy space. Children, some returning from lessons, others delivering small messages or errands, moved carefully between the adults. Air steps were lighter, their presence softer, but they followed the steady rhythm of the grown-ups around them. When a child's path crossed too tightly with another's, both stepped aside politely, their small gestures reflecting the gentle manners taught by the neighborhood's elders. The crowded street didn't overwhelm them. Instead, it felt familiar and supportive, The air carried a mix of sounds, yet none felt sharp or unsettling. Instead, the different noises blended into a low, comforting chorus. Soft conversations rose like a murmur of water. Tools clicked gently. The shuffle of cloth, the rustle of baskets, and the occasional ring of a metal cup against a wooden counter added texture to the atmosphere. Even the footsteps, countless as they were, contributed a steady rhythm that held everything together. Near a well at the center of the street, people gathered to fill their containers. They formed an informal, fluid line, stepping forward with quiet cooperation. A young man offered to help an older woman carry her heavy water jug. She accepted with a calm nod. A mother lifted her container carefully while balancing her baby on her hip. A shopkeeper waited patiently, holding several clay vessels meant for brewing tea. None of them seemed bothered by the weight. The closeness brought an easy sense of shared responsibility, as though everyone understood that patience made the street feel like home. Small groups naturally formed where space allowed. A trio of men paused in the shade of a leaning balcony to discuss the day's work. Their words were soft, their expressions relaxed. Across the way, two women exchanged recipes, tracing shapes in the air with gentle, expressive hands. A group of teenagers leaned against a wall, speaking quietly about their future plans while watching the movement around them. Even in their youthful energy, their voices stayed mellow, blending with the calm atmosphere. A traveling storyteller settled onto a short wooden stool near a stone corner, drawing a modest circle of listeners. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he let his words drift softly, allowing only those nearby to hear. His stories unfolded like slow floating threads, weaving gentle images of distant mountains, quiet rivers, and friendly wanderers. People passing by paused briefly, soaking in a sentence or two before continuing on their way. His presence gave the crowded street an almost dreamy layer, like a peaceful melody that didn't demand attention but welcomed it kindly. Vendors continued tending to their goods with a calm focus. A produce seller rearranged his vegetables to make space for new baskets carried by his daughter. A woman selling pottery wiped dust from the rims of her bowls, stacking them carefully into neat towers. A man selling spices ground herbs with smooth circular motions, the soft grinding sound blending with the murmur of footsteps. Though the street seemed full, each vendor moved gently, treating their small sections of space like sanctuaries of peaceful work. People carrying goods navigated the tight pathways with quiet awareness. Baskets of grain brushed lightly against bundles of cloth without causing frustration. When two people approached a narrow point at the same time, they exchanged small gestures, one stepping back, the other nodding in thanks. The closeness of the crowd didn't feel like pressure. Instead, it created a sense of shared understanding, a silent agreement to move with kindness. A musician leaned against a doorway, plucking the strings of a small instrument with slow, thoughtful strokes. The notes drifted through the air like cool ripples. The melody was unhurried and gentle, adding another layer of calm to the movement around him. People walking by listened for a brief moment, letting the music soften their steps before continuing onward. The tune became a quiet companion to the rhythm of the street, filling the space with understated comfort. Even the animals added to the gentle harmony. A stray cat wandered calmly between feet, rubbing lightly against anyone who paused long enough. Two donkeys carrying light loads walked steadily beside their owners, their hooves making soft thuds against the ground. Birds fluttered above the rooftops, calling softly to one another. These small presences moved with as much ease as the people, finding their place within the calm flow. In the busiest hour of the day, the street felt full but never overwhelming. The closeness brought people a quiet reassurance, a reminder that even in daily tasks, they were surrounded by familiar faces and gentle spirits. Every passing glance, softened word, or shared smile formed a thread of connection woven into the fabric of the neighborhood. As the sun drifted toward a kinder angle in the sky, the crowd continued to ebb and flow with the same peaceful energy. The people moved through the narrow pathways without hurry or irritation, carrying with them a comforting sense of community. In the warmth of those crowded streets, hearts remained quietly connected, held together by the everyday grace of living side by side. The neighborhood moved through its days with a gentle familiarity, shaped not by rules written on paper, but by quiet habits passed from one generation to the next. People lived close enough to hear each other's footsteps, close enough to notice when someone's door opened a little later than usual. These small observations created a natural closeness, the sort that formed slowly, like smooth river stones shaped by years of flowing water. It wasn't forced, it wasn't loud, it was simply the way life unfolded. Along the narrow lanes, the sound of distant voices blended with the faint clatter of morning tasks. Families stepped outside to start their day, greeting neighbors with soft, warm nods. A woman sweeping her doorstep paused to smile at a child carrying a basket almost too big for his arms. An older man adjusting a hanging lantern exchanged a quiet hello with a passer-by. These small gestures held a gentle weight, forming threads of connection that wove across the entire community. The people never seemed rushed when it came to supporting one another. If a cart got stuck on an uneven patch of ground, a few hands would appear almost instantly to steady it. If someone dropped a handful of vegetables, others helped gather them without hesitation. Even children, watchful and thoughtful, knew to step aside, offer space, or hold a door open with their tiny palms. Togetherness was not something anyone needed to teach them. It was absorbed through daily life like soft sunlight warmed the stones beneath their feet. Neighbors shared food with a natural kindness. A scent drifting from one home often led to a quiet knock on the door next to it, with someone offering a small bowl or warm piece of bread. The person receiving the food rarely refused, not out of politeness, but because accepting small kindnesses was simply part of the neighborhood's rhythm. Later, they would return the gesture with something of their own, creating a flow of generosity that moved around like a calm breeze. During the warm hours of the afternoon, people gathered in shaded spots where narrow streets opened just wide enough for small groups to settle. Some sat on low stools, others stood leaning gently against walls, their voices soft and steady. They spoke about ordinary things, the weather, the harvest, the new cloth at the market, or the sound of birds gathering on the rooftops. Their conversations didn't need excitement to feel meaningful. The simple act of spending time together was enough to create a comforting sense of belonging. Children brought their own brightness to the community's closeness. They shared marbles, chalk, and tiny treasures they found along the paths. When one child learned a new game, everyone joined in. If someone fell or scraped a knee, the nearest adult would kneel with calm hands, dusting off dirt and offering soft reassurance. These moments taught the children that care was something given freely, and so they passed it on to one another without being asked. At times the air filled with warm laughter drifting from open windows or from groups seated outside their doorways. The laughter never felt loud or overwhelming. It rose gently like bubbles rising through still water. When someone shared a funny story, others leaned in with relaxed smiles, enjoying the simple pleasure of shared humor. Even those who weren't part of the conversation often smiled from a distance, warmed by the sound alone. Many evenings brought a soft glow to the streets as lanterns flickered to life one by one. Their light spread across the walls and ground, creating gentle pools of golden color that made the narrow pathways feel cozy. Families sat outside to enjoy the cool air, chatting quietly while the day slowly faded. Sometimes musicians played light melodies that drifted tenderly through the alleyways, adding to the calm atmosphere. No one commanded the music, no one requested it. It was simply one more way people offered their presence to others. When a family prepared for a celebration, whether large or small, neighbors stepped in to help without waiting to be asked. Someone might bring extra plates, another would help hang cloth decorations, and others adjusted lamps to give the courtyard a cheerful warmth. Every pair of hands worked with ease, turning preparation into a peaceful shared ritual. The celebration itself always felt gentle, filled with heartfelt smiles and warm gratitude, rather than noise or grand spectacle. Even in moments of difficulty, the community stood together with quiet strength. If someone fell ill, neighbors took turns bringing food or offering to run small errands. If a roof needed repairing after a storm, people gathered with tools, working side by side until the job was done. Their support never came with conditions or expectations. It flowed naturally from the closeness of their lives, like water from a steady spring. Certain corners of the neighborhood became natural gathering spots for reflection. A small stone bench along a curved pathway often held someone seeking a moment of quiet. If another person joined them, they exchanged a calm smile before settling into a peaceful silence. The stillness shared between them was its own form of togetherness, gentle and grounding. The neighborhood didn't require constant conversation to feel connected. Sometimes shared quietness deepened the bond even more. As the day softened into evening, the streets carried a peaceful rhythm shaped by all the small connections formed throughout the day. Footsteps slowed, conversations faded into soft murmurs. The familiar glow of lanterns reflected against the walls, giving the entire neighborhood a comforting warmth. People returned to their homes with a sense of calm contentment, knowing that they lived among hearts willing to support, share, and gently uplift one another. The community remained steady in its togetherness, shaped by countless soft moments that rarely drew attention, yet built an unshakable foundation of trust. Every greeting, every shared task, every quiet smile contributed to the peaceful strength of the neighborhood. In the closeness of the crowded streets, they found not discomfort but a deep, enduring sense of unity, one that wrapped around their daily lives like a warm, familiar blanket.